please feel free to join also our events in the upcoming days. So my name is Jessica. I am the president of PyNam. We started back in 2015. That's when we had our first event, and it has been a ride. It has been a hard one at times, but also very satisfying. It's an accomplishment to have now 20 people in our meetup and meet people from so many parts of the world. We are super, super excited. We have been able to grow in the past few years. We were able to start a PyLadies group. We were also able to start a data science group. We were able to start a PyNam Scholars group, which has been very, very successful. Our PyNam Scholars is coding clubs that are now targeted for high schools. We have not moved into smaller schools like the primary schools, but the target is definitely to reach there once we are kind of successful at the secondary schools. But it's a subgroup of ours that we are very proud of, and that has been led by high school learners, and it has accomplished a lot. So if you want to join them in any way, whether you want to join PyLadies or the Django Namibia subgroup or the data science group, you can write us on our email at PyNam Society, PyNamSociety@gmail.com. We'll be able to add you on the WhatsApp groups. We also have a main WhatsApp group for PyNam. That is where we share most of the information. So if you want to keep up to date with any information that is instant, please also email us and we'll be able to add you to that group. Uno will be talking to you about the membership and the process that is involved, and some fees that you can pay to support the society. He is not here right now, so hopefully when we start giving talks, he will show up at some point to be able to give you more information on that. So we do have a website called PyNamibia, and it's hosted on Heroku. So I will share the links also in the chat for anyone who would like to keep up with us and read more about who we are and maybe read about upcoming events as well. And our website is also linked on our Twitter page. So you are more than welcome to join us through the Twitter page. The main thing that we are planning to have now in June is our conference, the PyCon Namibia conference. It's the biggest event that is organized by our subgroup. We love it. We meet so many people from so many different backgrounds, and we have talks on so many topics that are related to Python, and we get to learn so much. And we also have workshops. That is an event that has brought us all together. That's where we all started, so we love it so much. We have proposals. We have open proposals for the talk, for talks for the conference, and we are not seeing a lot of Namibians. So please join. You are encouraged to submit a talk. Even if you don't exactly know 100% what you want to talk about, or you are not very confident on what you want to talk about, submit a talk. Ask us for a mentor. We know so many people that have so much experience in giving talks that can guide you and help you on how to construct your talk. So don't feel shy. If you are a beginner, feel free to submit a talk, and then we can give you a mentor who will help you prepare for your talk. There is still a whole month and a few weeks as well before actually maybe 2 months even before the conference. So there's so much time to prepare. Don't feel shy. This community is ours. If we are not the ones participating in the talks, who else will grow the community? So it's important for us to join the conference, to participate in workshops, to participate in our own conferences and so forth, so that we can sustain the community. So it is a broad community. We have friends from all over the world. We have people submitting talks from all over the world, but we encourage that Namibians do the same, because you guys are the ones who can grow the community. So I encourage you to submit a talk. We are looking forward to seeing it. The last date for submitting talks is this Sunday. So think of an idea.
Who is coming in here? I said I forgot that when joining who's coming here at night? Yeah.
Who is that person?
Can't you read it?
Ivy, can you mute yourself or is it
Remember,
someone
you
else?
can mute her. It's Tayakula, I think.
Okay.
In case
All
she
right.
did.
So sorry for the distraction, but well, where was I? So yeah, we are waiting for your talks. The submission will close on this Sunday, unfortunately. But there's still a lot of time. Please think of an idea, submit, and then you just let us know via email that you need a mentor, and we'll allocate someone for you who has experience in giving talks. So again, thank you so much for everyone who participated or who already submitted talks. Thanks also to everyone who is joining our meeting tonight. Hopefully we are all going to learn a lot from the respective speakers. Thanks also to the speakers who availed their time to come and give their talks, tonight and share their knowledge with us tonight. Unfortunately, our first speaker has connection issues and he might not be able to join us. And the last speaker also cancelled due to some private matters. So we will not be able to hear from them
Perhaps
tonight.
Saara can chip in for us.
Yeah, we'll probably just let Saara and Carol carry on with their talks. But we apologize for the speakers who cancelled, but this is something that we experience all the time, whether in the conference or workshops or events like this. So yeah, if someone else wants to come and share their maybe a small experience or a talk or a tool that you want to share, maybe also as well, it will be very much welcome to us. Maybe Daniele or Juan, if you have something that you want to share as well that is related to Python, you are most welcome to join. There might be also some people from different communities that want to join. Vuyisile, maybe you might want to tell us a little bit about the Python community in Zimbabwe. If you want that, we are also very happy to hear from you. So yeah, I will let Ivy take over.
Thank you for
so
that.
much for the platform.
Thank you, Jessica. Always lovely hearing your words of inspiration as the president of PyNam. Just a few rules so we don't get interruptions. If you want to say something, please raise your hand. There's an option for that on the side. And then while the speakers are doing their thing, please try to mute your speakers. And then speak with regard for everyone else, the new techies and the interested ones. Just not too much technical knowledge, just so they can understand exactly what you mean. So since Albus couldn't make it, Mr. Albus Zokora, the software engineer and architect, is not able to make it today. So we will go first with our second speaker, which is Saara Amukugo. She's a robotic process automation in the real world. Studied applied mathematics for Namibia, UNAM, and holds a post-degree diploma for Wits University. A data scientist by profession, works on developing machine learning and algorithms. Saara is the lady who's going to open the talks for us tonight. So please have the floor, Saara.
Thank you so much, Ivy. I see that my screen share is disabled.
Okay.
Maybe just enable it for me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I just did that, so you should be able to share now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ivy, for that amazing introduction. I must say I'm very impressed with the turn up in today's meeting or meetup, because many a times when we have this technical talks, the turn up is always very, very minimal. So yeah, I can say that we are really getting somewhere. So yeah, as Ivy has mentioned, I'm a data scientist by profession. I've worked on a few robotics projects, but mainly my focus is on building machine learning algorithms, doing a whole lot of fancy dashboards and so forth. So in today's talk, it will be strictly robotics. So I'll be touching on RPA. So what are the benefits of RPA? Where do we use RPA and so forth? And towards the end, we'll be having a demo. So there was a request for me to keep it a bit technical and keep the theoretical talks as minimal as possible. So as we know, as we all know, the fourth industrial revolution is already here, and automation, or the process of computers performing tasks of humans, is leading in the forefront of technological advances, which will impact the way we live and as well as our day-to-day work. So with that said, let me just dive into what exactly is robotics. Why robotics? How did I get into robotics and the likes? So I'll just give you guys a very brief overview as to how did I come about doing robotics or automating processes as a data scientist. So robotics, data science, and machine learning, right? So all those fall under the umbrella of artificial intelligence. So it does really make sense for someone in my field of study to really be curious with the different subsets that fall under AI. So the first time I automated a process, right, which was driven by or the inspiration was driven by the recent COVID that hit us. So we realized that there were certain people that had to work from home, some had to still work from the office. And the reason for those that are working from the office is because of our old ways of work, right? So I took it upon myself to just really think of which certain processes, right, can be automated within the organization that I work for, just to really better and minimize the workload for those specific individuals. But the first time as well, when I thought of robotics, I also thought of, the physical walking, talking robots. So when somebody came to me, it's like, oh, I built a robot. I'm like, oh, so you're building robots that are walking around in the midst of humans, right? So, but as we go along, you'll get to really understand what exactly do we mean by robotics or robots in RPA and so forth. So to dive in, let's first touch on what exactly is this robotics process automation that I'm really making a huge fuss about. So robotic process automation is basically just the process where a robot is doing the work of a human being. So this can be rule-based processes, this can be manual processes, and so forth. So to give an example, let me give an example of when you go to the bank, right? So when you go to the bank, there's a process of where you need to open an account, right? So you always have to go give your ID, proof of residence, and the likes. So what a robot in that case would then do is, instead of the human being opening the account, right, this process will be automated in such a way that the robot will be the one opening the account for you, as opposed to a human being. So we have two types of automations. There's the fully automated processes and the partial automated processes. So when we talk about fully automated processes, we talk about processes where the robot is the one doing the tasks of a human being from the very, very beginning till the very end. Whereas when we talk about partial automation, it's the process where a robot will automate a certain process, but only to a certain extent, and then human intervention will then have to take place. Right. So moving on, we're talking about the benefits of process automation. So these are not just benefits for organizations, for employers. It can be your own benefits as well for your mini organization and stuff like that. So when you automate a process, right, the first thing that you need to consider is you are relieving a staff member of a certain task, right? So if it, for example, used to take somebody 30 minutes to open an account, right? So this 30 minutes is additional time added to the staff's time, considering that this process is now automated and a robot will now be able to do this specific task, right? So with that, it increases productivity in a sense that this specific individual will be able to put this 30 minutes to other important tasks that they do on their day-to-day basis. And then we also have reliability. So with robots are very reliable, hey? In a sense that they can work 24 hours a day, 365 days, right? So you can basically automate a process and have it run every single day. And it's very consistent. So there's always a lot of questions about, so yeah, what if the robot ends up doing something that we didn't tell it to do? You as a developer know what you've coded, right? So the robot is only going to do what you've told it to do, right? So that's So in that sense, there's a very high accuracy. If you have really coded what you're supposed to do, the accuracy will be very high in terms of what you're delivering. Because as humans, we are very prone to errors. So you would always be copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And during that copy, paste process, the chances of you mixing up stuff is very high. So in terms of compliance, before automating any process, right, in any organization, there has to be a proper framework, and there has to be business sign-offs. So what I mean by that is you don't just decide that you want to automate a process. There are certain procedures that need to be followed in order to get to the end of your process or delivering it to your end users. So you need to have a framework in place. You need to make sure that the relevant individuals or departments that will be affected by this automation are involved. They need to sign off. And once all that is complete, you can then start thinking of deploying your model. In terms of applications, I would really like to think that automation is applicable in all fields of life. Hey, so these are just 4 examples that I gave, but automation can be done in every field that you find yourself, right? So in a simple example will be in human resource. So as a human resource officer, you probably deal with onboarding and offboarding of employees, maybe on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. I wouldn't really know, but yeah, it does happen. So one would really like to think of how would you automate that process, in a sense that you don't really have to be doing the onboarding and offboarding all the time. You can literally have these processes automated, and then you can focus on something else as an HR officer. In financial services, the example that I gave earlier of opening and closing of accounts, supply chain management, where you would automate the tracking of shipments and so forth, as well as in accounting. But automation can also be done in health sectors. It's quite a number of examples. So I have given other examples as well towards the end. So I gave reference to a few reading materials that one can make use of, just to really get an understanding of how do I actually get to automate processes in my field. So in terms of robotics or automating in Python, there's always a big question as to why Python. I have made use of another software before, which is not Python, which is called WorkFusion. But with all honesty, I'll have to say that I think for me, Python was by far the best tool that I've done automation in. Firstly, it's an open source, so it's free. You don't need to pay for licensing and all that. It has an extremely large community. I don't ever remember encountering a problem that someone has not experienced before. So the problems are always, it might not really be the same problem, but it might be related in one way or another, right? So when you have a problem and you go on Google, they Stack Overflow, they're always very helpful. It's really amazing. The Python community is amazing. And then there's quite a number of libraries. So if you want to do robotics, you want to do machine learning, web development, all those things can be done in Python, because Python does have libraries for all those sorts you want to carry out. So in terms of automation for this specific use case, I've made use of what we call a Selenium package. There are other packages as well. I haven't really explored them much, but I am on a journey of really just trying to understand, to make comparisons between the various packages in Python. But for now, I've made use of Selenium only. So it provides a single interface that allows test scripting in various other languages. And it's for web automation. So the example that I'm looking at tonight is web related, hence the reason why I'm making use of Selenium. And then there's also PyAutoGUI. So PyAutoGUI is great for times where you want to automate a process, but then there's a lot of mouse clicks or keyboard press, screenshots, and so forth. So you can make use of the PyAutoGUI to actually automate using that specific package in Python. So in terms of automation, there is quite a number of other other packages, right? But for now, in this presentation, I'm referencing the ones that I've individually or specifically made use of myself. So when it comes to automation, right? So in Selenium, you can actually automate from a web perspective. You can automate in either Chrome, Explorer, or Firefox. And when you do automation, let me say, for example, you'll have to log onto a portal, right? So to assume that we've all probably been to varsity or just high school in general. Or let me say your internet banking. Let me use internet banking since we all have accounts. So let me say, for example, you want to automate the logging on of internet banking, right? So there's a section for username and then one for password. But then you ask yourself, so if I have to automate, how will my robot know where to insert the username and where to insert the password? So we have what we call Selenium selectors. So during my demo, I will just also highlight how to make use of these locators. So we have what we call ID. So in your web browsers, you will then have to inspect certain elements, and you can either find these elements by ID, by name, by expert, and so forth. So, but I'll touch on that later and just give you a demo of how this is doable during the demo as well. So for now, since we're talking about automation, right? I just really want to give a real life example of a process that we'll be doing manually, as well as the same process that we are doing manually, but then automated, whereby a robot will be the one doing the same process, right? So what we will then do is what we are making use of today. Please just let me know if you can see my second screen. The orange.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we'll be using an HR example. So let's assume you're an HR officer, and in order to onboard customers, to onboard new employees, you have to log on to a portal. I'll share this link in the chat after my presentation. It's an open source, so everyone can make use of it. The username and password that I'm making use of are the ones at the top here. So for username, as I said, this is the manual. So we are now doing it manually before we can demonstrate how a robot will do it. So this is me logging in manually to this portal. So once we've logged in, sorry. So once we've logged in, this is how the portal will look like. So there are a lot of other tabs, right? So for those that are interested and would probably like to try later on, you can also just try to automate the other remaining tabs and just see how does it work, what will you get, just for the fun of it and for practice as well. So for this presentation, we are going to make use of the PIM, which is now the onboarding of employees. So I'm going to go to PIM. Myself as an HR officer. So this is me now sitting at my desk and onboarding a customer. So I'll go to PIM, go to add employee, and then I'll put in the employee's name. So I have an Excel file here that just has 3 names. So this is just for demonstration purposes. So what I would personally do as an HR officer, I'll open my Excel file, go to first name, copy, paste. Last name, copy and paste. So the cycle will go on like that. So that is basically what I'm going to keep doing the entire day that I'll have to be onboarding customers. I mean, employees. Very boring. I really cannot imagine myself doing this repetitive task on a daily basis, guys. So once you've done that, then there's another section again where you have to add personal information. So we go back to our Excel file, we look for the customer, the employee's license number, we paste it. So that is basically what you're going to be doing, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. So the chances of you getting the license number of Sasha for John is very high, right? So you might probably walk or answer a call and totally forget where you were, and then you'll just copy paste everything because it's a lot of work. So once that is done, you'll then have to click on save. Save, go, add the next employee, and the cycle goes on until your very last employee for the day. So once you're done with it, you will then have to log out. Log out of the portal, and then you can now continue with your other tasks. So in terms of the Selenium locators that I've mentioned, where you can find an element using ID, name, expert, and the likes. So what you would then do if you are to automate this process, let's say you want to insert the first name. What you would then do is you would right click, click on inspect. So when you click on inspect, you have this little pop-up on your right side. I hope it's everybody's right. And then you'll click on this, select an element in the page. So what you would then do is you'll click on this little icon here, and then you go under name. So when you go on name and click on name, you'll see that you have different selectors here. You have type, you have name, you have class, you have ID. So in terms of automation, let ID always be your first option. If you do have an ID in your locator, make use of the ID, because the ID is like a unique identifier for that specific element, right? Your ID is basically just like your ID number, so it's very unique. So you then find your element using the ID. So you then click, copy and paste it in your code, find element by ID, and then the name that you'll then have to input in that name section. So that is just how you look for your selectors. So if you go to middle name, it will be the same. You'll have a different ID for middle name. At times you would always want, maybe you'd like to make use of an expert, for example. So what you would do is you would right click, go to copy, and then you go to copy full expert or copy selector, and then you just incorporate it in your code as well. So I'll share the code as well on the chat for those that are interested. And then maybe you can just start playing around and then just see how everything works. I think you'll probably you will get in I think it will be very helpful if you really want to embark on a robotics journey, just to really see how do you do stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Elements, it's very much the same across. And automation can also be done in other programming languages, guys. So for myself, I really, as I've mentioned, I just prefer doing it in Python. So now we are moving on to the next example where we have our robot doing the work for us. Remember, we had 3 names, and this robot takes less than a minute to actually complete or to onboard all 3 employees. So it's basically logging in by itself, clicking on the PIM, and then adding the employee. So basically everything that I was showing you guys now, but just a robot doing it in the back end. You click on save, and then it will go to the personal details, and then it will insert all the personal details of that specific employee. And believe me, this process for the robot, I'm sure for me it probably took about maybe a minute, and then for the robot it will take probably like 5 seconds. So it's already busy with the second employee with onboarding, and then it will literally go on and on until the very last entry. Okay, so this is the second last one, and then we'll wait for the last one, which is now, yes. So Bruno is the last employee that's being onboarded. So you see, it's like automation really relieves a lot of time and a lot of, it really relieves a lot of stress of the manual tasks, the repetitive manual tasks that have to be done on a daily basis. So once it's done, and then it logs out. Less than a minute. It took the robot less than a minute to do the task that I would probably do in 5 minutes. Moving on, after building as a developer, obviously after building your robot or automating your process, you then now need to think of deployment. Where is my robot gonna sit? But before deployment, there are a few stuff that you need to take into consideration. The first being testing. Testing is very crucial, not only for automation, but for anything else for anything else that needs to be built, right? So you need to test just to make sure that the exceptions that you have incorporated in your code are actually doing what they're supposed to. Secondly, you need to think of your hosting platforms. Where is my robot going to sit? So it might sit on a cloud, it might sit on a server. If it's sitting on a server, how much memory do I need? All those other stuff. So in terms of the deep technical parts now, when it comes to architecture, the infrastructure and stuff, I usually work with my IT team just to assist from that angle. So I would just tell them what I really want and where I want my my bots to sit. Other people have robots that are sitting on monitors, where you just have a monitor and it logs on a daily basis, and then your bot starts running. The third would be change management. So we are all very aware that people are still very stuck up in the old ways of work. So it's in organizations, it really takes a lot of time to really just how do I put it? To really just make sure that people are making use or adapting to this change that has been incorporated. So you always need to involve your HR team just to make sure that they have explained the new change to the different or the relevant departments that are being affected, how they can make use of this system, the benefits that they will get from actually making use of the new change that has been implemented. And then lastly is business sign-off. So for every process, you need some sort of approval. So you can't just decide that you want to automate a process and then that's it. So there's a very lengthy process that needs to be followed in order to get to the deployment, in order to actually get to the usage phase. So you need to come up with you need to have structured frameworks, you need to have process flows. So your as-is process, like before the bot used to do the process, how was it done? And then the as-is. So the as-is is what will the robot be doing, right? So all these things are very, very, very crucial when deploying your robot. So just make sure that the relevant departments that are affected are actually involved in the entire end-to-end process of your automation. As I've mentioned, these are just a few reading materials. I can also share them on the chat with you, just to go through and just to really have a great understanding of what exactly is robotics, how do I use robotics in my specific field and so forth. And also just to put it out there, I do, for beginners or for anybody who's really interested in learning automation, I do give free lessons, maximum of 2 hours, just to really get you started, setting up everything and so forth, to really just embark on this journey, because automation it's really, I think it's a need for every organization. It's with the way or with the pace at which technology is moving, a lot of processes need to be automated. So I don't think as a receptionist, you're supposed to sit and think, oh, a robot is going to take my job. Rather think of how can I, like the work that I do, how can I automate this work so that I'm involved in the changes that are coming? So you won't have to lose your job, but you're going to actually be in the forefront of making these changes to the job that you used to make. So yeah, that is actually one of the reasons why I started this free lessons. As I said, it's a maximum of 2 hours only. The reason for that is time constraints. So there are other activities that I also work on. But then if you do start and you get stuck somewhere, you get some sort of error, I'm more than willing to always help. I will leave my LinkedIn details as well in the chat below for anyone that is interested and would like to embark on this robotics journey, just so that we can get started together and yeah, be the change that we would like to see. Thank you so much, everyone. That's the end of my presentation. So I'll leave the floor for any questions. Maybe Jessica, if you could just read up the my screen.
Thank you, Saara. That was really great and very informative. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure there's a bunch of questions, so please do ask Saara. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. It was super informative. How do you approach projects like this where the website is, I don't know, complicated and it requires some special login and then it redirects to some iframe or something like that? Like, do you have any advice on how to approach a project like this?
With the use of iframes.
Yes, or in general, like how, if you have any tips on how to navigate all the HTML, so to better understand what to do and so forth.
Yes, that's a very common problem, especially with Internet Explorer. I think it's basically just a matter of understanding how do I put it? So in terms of iframes, right? So there's a lot of tables that you would find under an iframe. So it's basically just really, really understanding. I really don't have any other sort of special advice or special, how do I put it? Yeah, so it's basically really just understanding what exactly are you looking for and how do you navigate through the tables to actually get to that hidden element that you're trying to find.
Excellent. Thank you so much. There's a couple of people raising their hands. Sorry, I forgot to raise mine.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, somebody... go ahead then.
Is there any other question?
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you very much. That was really interesting to hear about. And at the end, you said that people don't need or shouldn't be worried that this is going to take away their job. And it sounded as though maybe you encountered that already and had to deal with those kinds of worries from people. Did you have that experience?
Of course I did. I still do have, actually, where people are just really so stuck up on, oh, so you're automating this process, so you're the one that's taking my job away from me, and you know. But I always tell people that I think it's time we as individuals really start upskilling ourselves. If you really do know that myself is, let me say, for example, is a lawyer, just a hypothetical example. So myself as a lawyer, if my job is going to become redundant in the next 3 to 4 years, what do I need to do to make sure that I actually move at the pace of technology and be at the forefront of the changes that will be made as to how our lawyers going to be working 4 or 5 years from now? So it's really just about upskilling yourself. You don't need to have people that have studied computer science, software engineering, and the likes. They are advantaged because this is the language that they understand. But as they are not really exposed, and we really need to do a lot of reading, I think this is really the time to really make sure that you learn as many programming languages as you can. Learn as many, but master one. And then just start really practicing. I think it really helps when you learn these things from your point of view, from what you understand and what you are comfortable with. Only then will you really be able to relate and see, how do I actually apply this somewhere else?
And were you able to reassure people who had those concerns?
It's very difficult. As I said, people are very reluctant to change. Very, very reluctant to change. But yes, I think it's just a matter of time.
Thank you for that, Saara. Does anyone have any more questions?
I see Sam.
I do. Yes, I'm not really familiar with web automation. So is there a level of sophistication when you learn the basics of automation, web automation, since you find yourself in maybe let's say you automate the process, and then after it completes, it asks you for to choose those images, the capture images. I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
To capture.
Yeah, that's where you have to prove whether you're not human or not. I mean, you're not if you're a human or not. Yeah, such blocks. So when you automate and then it hits into that, it's like a stop. And then you have a list of things that you have to automate in the same way. But these are like obstacles that you have to run into. How do you get to solve these?
I don't know. I always like making use of exceptions a lot, hey, because I have encountered those quite a lot. So I make use of exceptions and then try to create some sort of function. If there's any similarities in those little pop-ups that I'm experiencing, just create some sort of function that you can actually incorporate for every step where you actually need that.
All right, I'll go. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Sarah. That was informative. Myself, I'm a automation test developer, so it was nice to see that automation is coming into mainstream. Two questions I had. One is a lot of issues that I deal with are like flaky tests, because even though automation is reliable in doing the repetitive actions, they're also dependent on things like infrastructure, like internet or memory or things like that. So what are some ways that you have overcome some of those dependencies that are just not in your control?
I think for me, the main dependency was internet, as you've mentioned. Hence the reason why I like having my hosting platform as a server, right? So when I'm connected to a server and my bot is running on that specific server, the server is connected to my organization's internet, so that even if my internet is down, the bot is still running because the organization's internet is still up and running.
Gotcha. Then my second question, kind of related to what Daniele said about, just showing the value of automation. I always think that, we can't always automate everything, but we can automate to the point where then the human interaction is very valuable. We're like finding those edge cases and such. But what has been your experience with trying to show the value of automation to, like, as you said, you need business sign off? What are some ways that you've been able to successfully do that?
To be honest with you, I've automated, I think, about 3 processes now for my organization, and it's still such a challenge to just get people on board, right? I just feel like there's really just so much that you can do because HR is involved, the business heads are involved, the specific end users are involved. But at the end of the day, it's not like it's some sort of force where you need to tell the people, yeah, you need to do this, else. So how we measure it now is we would look at the usage, right? So we would tell the business heads that we are going to hold you accountable if there's any sort of decrease or if the manual way of doing the process is still higher than the automated process, right? So what we would do is we'll do some sort of measure, like on a monthly basis, just to see the same process, how many people did it manually and how many people used the robot, right? So once you have a number of people that you can hold accountable, I think that's like the only way that you can really be assured that the change will be accepted. But I think if you are trying to run it yourself as a developer and do it solo, you might hit rock bottom at one point because it's really a challenge. Like change management is, guys, it's hectic. It's still a stress that I deal with on a daily basis. Sometimes I just even feel like, why are you guys coming to me? So it's really stressful, but yeah, time will tell.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Sarah. I hope most of your questions are answered. If there are any more questions, please edit in the chat and maybe Sarah can answer shortly. For now, I'm sure there are lots of people interested in knowing about PyNam and how to join after Sarah's beautiful speech and robotics and everything. So if Onushari can please lead the floor and just let people know how they can join PyNam and the steps and what they can learn and get from it exactly. Thank you.
I don't know what time period everyone is in, but over here is evening. It's around about 7:51. So how do I share? Because I'm on my phone. How do I share a document? Just hold on.
I've just given you those rights.
Okay.
If you, on the top, you should see an arrow pointing up in a square. I don't know if you are saying the same thing as I.
Yeah. I am.
Okay, that should be it.
Okay. Just wait. Just give me a minute. I did not know I was gonna come up next.
In the meantime, may I ask my question from Sarah?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, so Sarah, I'm a wood mason by profession, but I also code in my spare time. Now, I would like to know, like, what would be the need for me to automate some of my physical tasks since I do woodwork?
What would be the need?
Yes, or what would be the aid of automating certain processes, like let me say using computer aided design, but I have a certain bot that does that for me instead of me doing it myself.
I think the bigger question to ask is, what are you trying to achieve? Like, so when you're saying that you'd like to automate, so I think the bigger question will be more for yourself as to why would you want to automate? Because I think you understand your processes better. So what are you trying to relieve? Is there probably some tasks that you need to put more attention on, or you just want to automate for the sake of automating so that you have stuff running in the back end? Or so I think it's more for what do you want to achieve?
And my other question is there a way of automating without me having to need internet connection or being connected to a certain server, just running on one system without the need of internet connection? Let's say I'm deep in the kettle post somewhere and there is no network coverage whatsoever, but I want to use my automated process. How do I go about it?
If your processes, okay, that's not difficult question to say, but it also depends. Like, let me say, if your process, the process that you're automating, for example, only makes use of Excel, Word document, and so forth, right? Obviously, you don't need internet connection for those. But stuff like, if we know for a fact that there's no way you can use Google without internet connection, then there's really, from my perspective, unless maybe somebody from an IT field can tell us, I don't know of any other ways where one can make use of Google without internet connection.
Okay, that pretty much answers my question. But I have a small question. Like, excuse me, guys. Let's say I have a peer-to-peer system like Bitcoin, right? How do you automate that process to say make sure it conducts my business on my behalf on a peer-to-peer basis, but there's no third-party code running in the background? How do I go about that?
I think I'd really be able to answer you if I really understood the Bitcoin interface. Because now I think my mind is really just blank as to how does Bitcoin even look like. So it will be very. I think I'll really be giving you a blind advice. I think it would make more sense if I probably really understand the interface. Then I can really say, okay, this is what you can do. This is how you can go about overcoming that.
Okay, perhaps it's something we can discuss on your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you,
think we can
Shari.
take it offline.
Sweet. So, Shari, are you ready, or can we have one more question for Saara?
I think I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So over here we have. I just hope everyone can see this.
Yes.
Yes. So what we are trying to do this year, since this is just a 2018 document, but still the information is still quite relevant. We would like to introduce some of the packages that we feel like we want to create more members that are registered, at least, so that at least the new more function that are more the next events that we're going to be holding, people will just attend, because we need funds for things like venues, booking for venues, and catering for all sorts of things. So right now we want everyone who's like on the platform right now to see some of the prices that we're trying to so that we can raise some money for the society as well. Right now, Corona really hit everyone, and this is just some of the packages that they can go. Students can go for 100, and each member is entitled to attend all our meetups for free. Members are entitled to all workshops at half price, basically. Non-members that are not students, basically at any university or any tertiary, would pay 200, and they are also entitled to all our meetups and workshops on half price. So there's a premium, and there's a golden membership and a platinum membership. Each of them like have a different like for premium membership, it's $500. So that's Namibian dollars, by the way, for foreigners. So meetups will be for free, workshops for free. You'll be members are also entitled to free society roundups and V-neck shirts and golden shirt members will be entitled to also meetups, shirts, and another thing that I wanted to bring to our attention was the Patreon page. Hold on. I'm kind of using my phone. My PC has an issue right now. Sorry. This is our PyNam Society patron patron page where we want where we're looking for donors who can help us become patrons and give like a monthly amount. Since we have a project of trying to create a computer lab at the RTS high school, and this has been going on for a while now. And as you can see, everything is right there. This is how much we've risen so far. And all the stuff will be shared. But this is just some of the wait, there was something else. Sorry about that. I think that is, wait, hold on. Oh, my internet is quite slow today. So we really do want every member of the society to please register so that the upcoming events that we're going to be having on the 26th, so that they can so that I can attend freely. Those who are not registered won't be able to attend. And so this is just what I wanted to bring everyone's attention to, but I think I'm done. Any questions?
Daniela Procida's hand is up. I hope I said it correctly.
Sorry, I had my hand up from before, so I didn't have any new questions. Yeah.
Konja Shiamenya. Sorry. The pronunciation.
Oh, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
That's me. I have a question for Unochari.
Yes, please.
I attended a few PyCons, and the last one I attended, we had quite a few students from all over the country, some from Rundu, I believe. Now, I want to know how many more schools or high schools or institutions of higher learning or lower learning have you guys been able to reach in the last 2 years? And what's your plan on reaching more high schools and getting more people involved in Python?
Thank you for this question. It's a very good question. First things first, we want to create a community that just hold on. We want to create a community in our country. So we try to get as many schools involved as much as possible. But we also, for other schools that are not in the capital, we need a means of getting to them. So it comes down back to funding. So that's why we want membership people who are in the society to pay that $100. It's just $100, and that's the amount for the whole year. You do not need to pay another additional fee. It's $100 for the whole year. So if we can get that sort of backing from our community, local community here, I think that would go a long way, which will allow us to reach more schools, more pupils who are interested in computing, so we can have even more events. We definitely like to have more events, hold more hackathons, or just small events that doesn't even have to take like a whole week, or just like a 2-day or 1-day thing. So we do want more people to register, and or even people abroad can be patrons and donate whatever they can to the cause. And so far, we due to the pandemic, we haven't really done much this year. We have not done much with regards to outreach programs. We are just having subcommittees that we are trying to run, like the AI community and all AI community subgroup, and a bunch of other subgroups that we are interested in starting in other institutions and high schools. So far, that is all we're really we've been able to do. But I feel like with more funding, we'll be able to reach more schools and high schools. And yeah, hopefully I answered your question.
All right, thank you, Nachari.
My pleasure. Any more?
Ivy, can I also add on to that?
Yes,
this
please.
time? Yeah, so the executive that is responsible for PyNam scholars didn't manage to join us today, but there are a couple of plans for the PyNam scholars. Right now, we are planning to do a big school outreach program. We are kind of ready. The only problem right now is that the schools are going on holiday, so we will only be able to go in May. But we are ready. We have all the brochures and speakers and all that ready for the school outreach programs. This, however, will only happen in Windhoek until we have some kind of funding or budget allocated for going outside of Windhoek. But last year we did manage to get a school from Okahanja to join our workshop. So in the beginning of the year, in February and in March, we had workshops. So what we wanted is to have 1 weekend a month where we are having coding classes for the scholars. We had one in February, we had one in March, and then unfortunately the lockdown came along and then everything stopped. And so this year we decided that we are going to be doing a 3-month training for coding. And so it will be happening every Saturday for 3 months. And hopefully that will be able to get the scholars, off ground and be able to code really well. There is also plans for a conference that is coming up. But I can't speak on that at the moment because I don't have a lot more details. But we are definitely reaching out to more schools, especially in Windhoek. And then we'll have a training starting in either May. No, it will probably start in June since we will be doing the outreach in May. But I'm not the right person to answer this. I hope that gives you a bit of insight. So if you have a learner, for example, or a sibling or someone that you know that's a learner that would like to join us, feel free to reach out to us or to encourage them to join, because even if we don't reach out to their school specifically, because we can't reach every school, they will still be more than welcome to take part in the training that's coming up. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that, Jessica. That also adds up to what one of Saara's project, which is encouraging women to take space in the field of STEM and being unapologetic about being and doing what they believe in. So, and as you can see, PyNam is very welcoming to everyone. If you guys check in the check box, Jessica added a registration form for you to enter to try signing up if you are, of course, keen on doing so. For now, we will ask Vuyo to take the floor and explain to us how the Python community is doing in Zimbabwe. Maybe some tips and, of course, a few encouragement.
Well, I'm not the best person to talk about Python in Zimbabwe, but I'll do my best. You know, the pandemic has pretty much brought everything down to a halt. There hasn't been a meetup, there hasn't been a conference in 2 years. We're basically just chatting on WhatsApp now and connecting on social media. But before COVID, we had, like in my current city, we had regular meetups once every month. This was a general Python meetup, nothing specific. We'd have short talks from interested speakers, just like what we're doing here. But since COVID happened, we haven't been able to do anything. Yeah, but there's a lot of talent coming up in Zimbabwe. I recently did a thread to find people in tech that I could help connect with opportunities, and I was pleasantly surprised, so I'd say there's a lot more work to be done in our end. You guys are definitely doing much, much, much better than we are. You're more organized. You have things like this. So I'm actually the one learning from you.
Okay, thank you for that, Vuyo. Namibia is smaller, so we always think, okay, maybe we're still falling back, but it's good to know that we are doing so good during this pandemic. So thanks for the words of encouragement and, of course, the hope that you're giving us in that regard. Our next speaker will be Carol Willington from United States of America. She's going to speak about Jupyter Notebooks for Humans. Carol, are you ready to share the floor?
I am. I might need Jessica to turn on my screen share. But
I keep forgetting to do that, but I'll do it immediately.
That's no problem. It usually, oh, there it goes. All right, let's see. I'm gonna share my. All right.
Oh, sorry for that. I didn't introduce Jessica to you all properly. My bad. Jessica, I mean Carol to you. Carol is a leader in open source governance. She's a lead developer and advocate of @Notable.io, a steering council member for the Python language, and a board member of Quinsight AI Labs. She also develops with Jupyter Notebooks and is a Project Jupyter Steering Council member.
Thank you, Jessica. I hope you can see my slides. I am so excited and honored to have been invited to your meetup. There are such amazing things being done in Python Namibia and throughout all of Africa. And I found myself watching some YouTube videos yesterday and standing up and cheering at the work that you are doing. So thank you, Jessica, Ivy, everybody who has put stuff together. Saara, fabulous talk. I hope to see many more from you going forward. But today we're going to talk about notebooks for humans. And Jessica was super nice to list off the number of things that I've done or do. And one of the things I am most passionate about is learning and community. And everything here reflects that, but it's not really who I am. Who I really am is somebody who loves playing and creating with code, asking people, how did they make the thing that they're talking about? Oftentimes I'll ask at work, what happens if I do this? Or I wonder if I can break this, which sometimes makes the people I work with sad because I often am able to break it. But we learn a lot in the process. And I really embrace the concept that people are always more important than code. And something that I think I've seen time and again today is that concept of learning stuff, building stuff, and sharing stuff. And it is so vital for us as humans to be able to do that. So that's what I would like to speak with you today. And I just want to really recognize the local PyNam folks that are really doing great work on so many different levels: outreach, building community, setting a welcoming tone. If I had a tiny bit of Jessica's energy, I would be far more productive than I am now, but you have just a great thing going, and it's been an absolute honor to watch it continue to flourish and over the last few years. Jessica had mentioned there's a conference coming up, and she's looking for submissions for talks. I thought I would share the first talk that I gave within the Python community back in 2013. All of my slides were handwritten. I basically really didn't know what I was doing. I taught people how to build something on a Raspberry Pi, and it was all of 4 people showed up. But you know what? The 4 people and I had a fabulous time in San Diego, and I can't encourage you enough even if you are an absolute beginner, to make the effort to give a talk. You never know who else you're going to inspire and who else is facing the same things that you are. Some of the best talks are written by complete beginners. And I just want to make sure that, you know, anything I can do to help you, Jessica, to get people comfortable doing that, you just let me know. So now, notebooks for humans. Well, what's a notebook? It's something that lets us learn, build, and share. And in particular, Jupyter Notebooks let us combine code and other elements to actually communicate information to other people and do meaningful work. And as Saara was talking, I was like thinking, oh my gosh, we could use a notebook for this kind of automation thing, you know, particularly with like the cut and copy paste with the Excel. It was a great example. So right now, this was at the end of last year, there was like over 9 million Jupyter Notebooks on GitHub. There's probably way over 10 million now. So if you are learning Python, if you are learning data science, or if you're just curious about learning about music theory or many other things, you can probably find a notebook that somebody has written for that particular subject. So please do use the search on GitHub. The way I like to look at Jupyter Notebooks and the notebook in general is you're telling a story. And with that story, you're combining text or prose, you're combining code that can do meaningful work. You're using visualizations because sometimes people, when they see a graph or a picture or listen to a video, they're learning more than if you just wrote the wall of text. And I kind of view notebooks as a way to have interactive documents and documentation. And I'm gonna kind of walk you through a little bit of the flavor of that. Classic Jupyter Notebooks became Jupyter Lab, which has a number of cells that are one on top of the other. You can have Markdown, which is prose in a cell. You can have code cells where you're actually executing code. And then other cells, which we'll see later, that have other functions. Jupyter Lab just released their 3.0 version. One of the nice things for folks that are already using Jupyter or teaching with Jupyter, there's now a simple interface. And that simple interface will let you simplify from a multi-windowed environment, which is more IDE-like, to a single page, which I find is much easier when I'm teaching, to have people not have as many things to be confusing and to be able to look at one document at a time. Another really cool thing that was in Jupyter Lab 3.0 is an integrated debugger. People have asked us for a long time because they're used to debuggers from their code editors or their IDEs to put it in Jupyter Lab. And to me, Jupyter Lab and Jupyter, they aren't code editors. They aren't strictly IDEs. What they are is they let you tell a computational narrative using code, using data, and manipulating that data to tell a story and communicate information to others. I've left a link here, so you can definitely try it out. All of my slides, so don't furiously write down the link, are on my speaker deck, and I will tweet them out afterwards as well, and there's a link at the end that has it. So no worries, you will have all this information after I leave. All right, so the debugger basically lets you set breakpoints and inspect variables at different points, much like you would if you were using PyCharm or Visual Studio or something like that. So I believe strongly that notebooks are for everyone, for learners, for experienced people. Really, your imagination is really all that will limit notebooks. And I think one of the nice things about notebooks is it uses a web browser to deliver information, but you don't necessarily have to have an internet connection. You can also use it on mobile devices as well as Chromebooks or PCs, Macs, and I think that's really helpful because not everybody has the same access to equipment and materials, and it makes it much easier for everyone to work together when it is browser based. So let's look real quickly at how do we build a notebook? And one of the things that is always the beginning of when you have to do something is oftentimes you need to install it. And the notebook at times has been very difficult to install. There is actually several different ways that you can install it that is much simpler. One of which is using MiniForge, which is a project maintained by the CondaForge community. And what's nice about it is it provides installation scripts for a number of different architectures and operating systems. And on the Mac, you could do something like brew install MiniForge, and it gives you an opportunity to also use PyPy and Mamba, which may be a little quicker when you want to download and install packages. Now, pretty much when you go to install MiniForge, if you're on a Mac, you're going to do brew install MiniForge. If you're on Linux or Windows, what you're going to do is download a link that coordinates with your operating system and architecture, and then you'll have a shell script, and then you're basically going to type bash and then the name of the shell script, and there are definitely directions in the README, and follow the directions that the terminal prints out as you do that. So what I found when I started teaching Python and also Jupyter Notebooks was the installation process can be a challenge for people who perhaps come from other careers where they're not comfortable installing software or using the terminal or the command line. And so what we did is we developed this web-based service called Binder, so that you don't have to install anything on your computer. Now, unfortunately, you do need internet access to use it this way. The other way that I just explained installing it, you don't need internet access all the time. You only need internet access when you're installing something. But here's a link, so you can actually go and try Jupyter Lab or the classic notebook right there in your browser without having to install anything. So I highly recommend you try that. So I said earlier that I think Jupyter Notebooks are for humans. And by that, I want to share sort of the 6 steps that I see to creating notebooks for humans that are useful and meaningful. And let's run through the steps. So oftentimes I start with text, and when I start a notebook, the first cell, I usually start with an explanation of what the rest of the notebook might do. Today, I'm going to share with you a notebook, and I will share the link to the notebook later, that gives a look at maps. And maps are useful for so many things, whether it's exploring climate or plotting a route to your favorite places in a country. And people often think it's very complicated to do it. Well, I'm going to show you a tool called Folium that actually makes it quite easy to explore maps and geographic data. Now, we've got our Conda Forge, Mini Forge, or we're working in Binder where everything's on the web. What we are going to do is install a few more packages, and the commands are right here in the notebook. So it's very easy to either execute them in the notebook or copy paste and execute it in a terminal. The next thing I do is I add some code to either get or create data. And in this particular example, I am actually going to get a map of my hometown and also the country of Namibia. And so what I do in the first cell is I'm basically importing the Folium library as well as the Pandas library. And the Pandas library helps people work with data frames, and data frames are very similar to like an Excel spreadsheet in concept. Then the second cell, I'm actually setting variable to a list of geographic latitude, longitude points. And the line after that, I'm using Folium's map function to put in a location and set a zoom start. And the zoom start will make a little more sense in a minute. And then I'm actually going to display it by saying my map in the notebook. And then I do the same process again, setting the coordinates for Namibia, setting using the map function of Folium to bring in the Namibia location and also set a zoom, and then share the Namibia map and display it within the notebook. Now, this lets us visualize information and a map. And this is actually my hometown. I am in the San Diego area. I live pretty close to the beach and the Pacific Ocean. And one of my favorite things to do is to explore the marine conservation area that you see here and go to the tide pools and look for animals and in those tide pools. And when I'm really lucky, and I've only been really lucky once, I have seen an actual small baby octopus, but oftentimes I see sea stars or shells or stuff like that. Now, also with the visualization, this probably looks a little bit more familiar to you in terms of a map. And so this is how the map initially displays within the notebook. And then the map is great, but you often want to do stuff with a map. And so you can interact within the notebook with the actual map. So you can, zoom in, zoom out. The zoom level that we had in the prior slide tells you what level of zoom you should start the map at when the function runs. And as you get more experienced with Folium, there's actually ways that you can drop pins at different locations. So say you wanted to drop a pin at the national park, you could do that in one line of code using Folium, and it's pretty cool. So if you wanted to plot out all the different places you might want to visit or chart, roads from one place to another, you can do that fairly easily with Folium. So interaction actually makes it much more fun to use a notebook. And when you're learning things like calculus or math, sometimes those visualizations really help to understand what's going on with a function, one of my favorite notebooks, which I made back in 2013, about the same time I made the hand-drawn slides, was a library called Music 21 that actually is a music theory library. So you could render sheet music, you could play music, you could create your own songs using notes, or you could do more sophisticated things like looking at all the jazz pieces by a certain performer and see how they relate musically to each other. Now, I do a lot of teaching, and there's a lot of folks out there that have taught subjects that I know very little about, or they teach it in a way that's much more engaging than I can. And I can't be everywhere, even to, teach about stuff like Jupyter. And one of the nice things about a notebook is at the bottom of the notebook, or really anywhere in the notebook, you can embed YouTube videos or podcasts or other pictures or links so that folks can have these resources readily available in a notebook and hear from the experts. Now, we talked about learning, we talked about building, and one of the most important things I think about the notebook is the ability to share it. And within the Jupyter Notebook interface for Jupyter Lab, there are buttons that you can press, either the copy binder link button or the binder button, that will give you a URL. There's one there at the bottom, or you can create a badge that says launch binder. And if you look at most of the scientific Python or data science project libraries on GitHub, many of them have a launch binder button. So you can actually try out the library in a live manner without having to install anything on a local computer. And that binder link can be shared widely. And, think about it. You might not all be able to be in the same place, but if Jessica creates something that she thinks is really cool, she can send you the link and you can launch a notebook with that information. And what I have found is it's really useful when you're trying to teach people at distance, because they can then consume the notebook just by hitting Shift-Enter or the little run button, the triangle run button, and moving forward. So sharing. I can't say enough about the Python community and how much sharing of information, knowledge, experiences have really shaped me as a human and many others as well. Oops. So we talked about and wanted to say you have a repo that doesn't have a binder link already made for it. You can go to the website mybinder.org, which is a free website. It was designed for sharing initially scientific information between scientists, but we saw the use was fabulous for actually learners and workshops. And you put your URL or a gist or a GitHub repo, GitLab repo in the field, and you don't actually have to fill out anything beyond that. And then you hit launch. And what it's doing is it's building a container in the cloud that is especially designed for your use, temporary use, and it will put all the things that you need to run that notebook in that container in the cloud. For those of you that have experience with cloud technology, web development, you might have heard of Docker and Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an orchestration framework for cloud services, and Docker is a container service or tool. And we basically use that to have built Binder. And it's an open source project. You can actually create your own binder called Binder Hub. And we also have a repository of the service that is open, so you can see how the actual service is created, and lots of documentation that goes with it. So back in my home of San Diego, we started in 2013 as a fairly small group of folks. We don't have the same resources or funding that folks in San Francisco or New York City have. So we have to be somewhat creative. And what we started doing were these 3-hour workshops in whatever space we could get donated to us. And we would teach people intro to Python, or teach people, test-driven development or an intro to Django. And back in, I think it was 2014, Audrey Roy, Trey Hunter, Danny Greenfeld, and others, we put together a intro to Python script or set of notebooks that would help people learn the fundamentals of Python. And it was largely based on Jessica McKellar's very popular Intro to Python tutorial. And what we found was, this was an experiment because at the time notebooks were still fairly new. By having the notebooks and being able to leave with the notebooks, it was a lot less stressful as people were learning. People could work together and make friends and have fun. And what we found from this initial workshop was it actually grew future mentors, future teachers, future speakers in the Python community. We all start as beginners some way. And some of the people who knew zero coding, zero Python back in 2014 are now actually active members of the Python community, teaching tutorials at PyCon US, writing books. So you never know what a small action of sharing your knowledge with somebody else, where it will lead down the road. And I think when you combine notebooks and community, everyone wins. And if you want to check out the materials that we use, the repo is right here. And there's a binder link. So I still use it today when I'm mentoring women, in the evening who are just getting started in coding. So Guido van Rossum was the original creator of Python, and that has grown to many, many, many other people contributing to the language. And one of the things he said was, a programming language created by community fosters happiness in its users around the world. And I can see it as I travel the world. Unfortunately, the pandemic has made that put on hold for a couple of years, but even speaking with folks via Zoom, I can see the energy and the happiness and the encouragement that you give each other and how that really is empowering you. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this talk, is notebooks can be made to be human friendly by combining text, code, visualizations, graphs, photos, multimedia things like workshops on YouTube, an ability to interact with code and data and maps and widgets and sliders and other things, so that you're getting a richer learning experience when you're going through the notebook. And then the power of sharing those notebooks widely is really what has, I think, contributed to Jupyter's huge success. And I guess it wouldn't be a Python community talk if we didn't have the famous quote, "I came for the language and I stayed for the community." And I can see the community that Python Namibia has built and will continue to build. And I'm just humbled by what you are doing. And I know personally, I've gained so much from being with you, thinking about this talk today, and interacting with people in the community. And my hope is that over time, I'll be able to meet smaller groups of you, someday in person, but maybe online as well, and share a little more detail about notebooks or Python. So I want to thank everyone for having me here. Encourage you to join PyNam. And also, there is the ability to become a free member of the Python Software Foundation. And one of the things the Python Software Foundation does is provide grants for people who are organizing conferences or workshops. And it's really helped the Python community as a whole grow and really foster that emphasis on learning and lifelong learning. So I want to thank everybody. I want to especially thank Notable, who I work for giving me the opportunity to contribute my time back to the community, and also having a job that is completely focused on learning and sharing resources on how to learn. And just thanks again for listening to me.
Thank you for that, Caroline. We have Joan Lewis who would like to ask a question. You can go ahead.
Hello, Carol. Thanks so much
Hi.
for the talk. It was super informative. I was happy to see the mention of the interactive debugger, because I was the one that opened the issue in 2017, and I was so excited.
Oh my goodness.
That it got closed in the 3.0 version. So I noticed that for your volume screenshots, you were using Jupyter Notebook, so the classic notebook. I wanted to ask you
Actually, I
how
wasn't. I was actually using the simple interface within Jupyter Lab.
Okay, fair enough.
You could use the classic notebook, but I was trying out the simple interface, and it actually worked quite well. And I guess it worked so well that it made you think that it was classic notebook.
Yeah, probably so. So yeah, thanks for the clarification. So
no worries.
Is, well, if you think the ecosystem is ready now to start migrating to Jupyter Lab and start promoting it more and pushing a little bit the community towards Jupyter Lab, or if you still see like the classic notebook is going to stay for longer.
Well, I think the user interface of the classic notebook will continue. The classic notebook itself was architected a long time ago. We used Python as well as JavaScript. And over the last couple of years, what we've done is optimize the Python code to serve many different front-end user interfaces. Jupyter Lab is one of them. Interact is another, which is a React-based notebook open source project, and VS Code and PyCharm and many others. And what I think will happen is, with this simple interface, and also another project that Jeremy Tulip has been working on that really uses maybe Jupyter Lab underneath, but is a classic notebook experience. I think what we're going to see over the next few years is people migrating to the newer tools. They're a little more performant, and I think they'll be a little more consistent and easier to kind of help people install and maintain. So, you know, I would say check it out. Binder's a great way to check it out. If you go to try.jupyter.org, or I guess it's now jupyter.org/try, you can try it out yourself and see what you think, and definitely let us know, because it took us 4 years to do the debugger, but it seems to be very popular. So thank you for bringing it up back then.
Thank you so much for your answer.
You're welcome.
Martha had a question as well.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Carol, for such a great presentation.
Thank you, Martha.
I'm very curious about your teaching experience. So what was it like to teach beginner programmers? Were there any challenges that you had teaching beginner programmers to program using Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebooks?
I think, you know, I think there's always challenges with teaching beginners. What I found was the notebooks gave me a way of providing documentation through the prose and code, so I could walk people through things step by step. But even before that, I think it's so important to have a comfortable learning environment, a safe learning environment, a welcoming learning environment, because people will be successful. They'll come to you because they want to learn. They'll be successful because they're supported in their learning path, whatever that might be, whatever speed that might be. So I try and really emphasize that people ask questions when they don't quite understand something, because it's probably how I explained it, not how they're processing it. And, you know, showing them that in the notebook, there's oftentimes like planning a birthday party or an event like PyCon Namibia. There's some setup that you do and some preparation. And that would be sort of like the import statements in a notebook to get the libraries that you're using. Then there's some actual like having the party or running the code and really doing meaningful work. And then typically there's some either conclusion or cleanup, because, you know, us Pythonistas, when we have a party, we do clean up after ourselves, because otherwise nobody will invite us back to use the free location again. But I think the biggest challenge is really figuring out what they need and doing your best to provide that. And I think Django Girls is an example of something that has done that very well. But, you know, lots of local areas can do it with Python. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I like the birthday example that you gave.
Oh, cool.
I found that like sometimes the first time I started using Python notebooks, I went about it in a very unstructured way. So I found that one of the challenges that I had when learning to code in Jupyter Notebook was running things in sequence, running code in sequence. So
yes.
Sometimes you might run an import statement, you forget to import a statement, and then you realize, oh shucks, I have to import this, and then you haven't imported it, and then you have to go back up again, and then yeah.
Yeah, that
is
to
follow. Yeah.
That is a challenge. There are third-party extensions that will force you to run in sequence.
Okay.
What I typically say when I teach folks is, you know, you should always run it in sequence. Like even if you're doing something new, like you're playing with databases or something, add another cell. Cells are inexpensive. They don't cost you any additional money to add another cell. And then you can run all if you get confused, if you've run the cells before or not. but it is very confusing sometimes for beginners. So it's really good to explain that up front so that folks don't run through the same experience you had.
Yeah, thanks again. Oh, one quick remark. I wondered, like I saw you mentioning the what is this? The binder link, sharing a link with sharing a link of your notebook. Does that work in the same way like Google Colab, or do people have people have real life? Like, can they open the notebook at the same time and edit it, or how does that work?
What you can do is you can open the notebook and you can actually execute cells, add cells, delete cells, things like that. It doesn't integrate with other individuals. It's still like a single individual using that notebook. But what you can do is when you're done with the notebook, you can download the notebook file so that you have it, you know, to run later or check into source control if you want.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Colab is a great option as well if you have access to that. So
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Super. There's also guest R007 who has a question for Carol.
Sure.
My question is, do you ever have imposter syndrome, and how do you challenge it?
I'm laughing because I have imposter syndrome almost every day. And one of the things I've learned is a lot of folks have imposter syndrome. And I think part of that comes from, you know, there's so much to know that I even, after 10 years of Python, I know just a sliver of, you know, web development, Python, scientific programming. There's always more for me to learn. And I learn so much from other people. I learn a ton from when I was teaching at Cal Poly University in the States. I learned so much from the students about how to, like, I could not figure out how to use Google Hangouts until one of my students taught me how to use Google Hangouts. And, you know, it's being open and maybe being realistic with yourself that you don't need to know it all. You know, you use what you need in the moment to get the job that you have at hand done. And you commit to learning over time what you need. And one of the great things about having a strong community like Python Namibia is people know, other people have gone through the same thing. They know what resources are effective, which ones aren't. Like, you know, just having somebody walk you through it once helps break down that imposter syndrome, and you realize, like, hey, I have a lot to offer as an individual. I'm going to offer what I can, and I'm going to rely on people for the things that I can't do today. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's some really good advice for all of us. I'm sure we all we all took that into consideration. Nothing is wrong with learning until you become the pro you need to get to where you need to. Daniela, I think you can share with us a few of your latest projects with PyCon and just drop some info.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's really a shame that Elvis and Benjamin can't be here, but I quickly put something together to share with you. Now, I have a question. When I share my screen, is it possible to have the camera working as well? I don't know if that works. We'll have to find out. But anyway, I'll make it up as I go along. It's really nice to see so many friends and familiar faces, and also new people from the Namibian community. We need as many of you as possible. So I'm really badly missing my PyCon Namibia, that I haven't been in the desert this February. So I really feel it. My soul is wandering around in the desert right now still. But maybe we'll have a chance to meet again soon. So let me move a couple of windows around, and I'm going to share my screen. Do I need to be given permission to share my screen?
You already have it, I think, Daniele.
I should already, yes, I think I have it. So I'm going to share this screen. Yes, good. And oh, sorry, it tells me I have to allow it in the system preferences. Excuse me 1 second while I quickly do that. Microsoft Teams, yes. I have to. Good, okay. So I hope you see that on the screen now. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, you are good. I can't see anybody now, so you'll just. I can't see thumbs up. So, thanks very much also to our two previous speakers for giving us those insights. I don't want to take much of your time. This is just to quickly share something with you. It's not nearly as well polished and presented as the previous talks. This is a little project I've worked on lately. I do quite a bit of photography. And first of all, I'm a developer, so that means I do some of the developing myself. I don't have a darkroom, so I just do it in the bath. And lately I've been experimenting. For you younger people, that's photography with film. So I have to develop film. And lately I've been experimenting, and I have a recipe that works. I didn't develop it, but didn't create it, but it uses instant coffee, sodium carbonate, and vitamin C to develop photos. So you can actually develop photos on film using those household items. Here's a picture that I took on film that I developed with instant coffee and vitamin C, in effect. So, of course, as a programmer, I not only like that kind of process, I also like the machinery itself. And so I've got quite a few old cameras. This is one of my favorites. It's this camera is from about 1976. So it's a pretty old camera. And they tend to go wrong or need repair. So I spend a lot of time in the repair manuals. This is what this camera looks like right now. And that's fairly normal. And what I thought about when I was taking cameras apart like this and looking at their mechanisms is that there's a lot of logic encoded in the mechanisms. And wouldn't it be interesting to try and reproduce some of that logic in code, in Python? So I had a little file hanging around for a couple of years in which I had some basic parts of the mechanism modeled in Python. And then this year I was asked to do a talk at a conference about documentation, and I needed a short segment of a couple of minutes to talk about documentation for a new project. And I thought, oh, I will document this little exercise with the camera. Anyway, I must have spent about 100 hours on it since I started. And it's developed into quite a complete project called CS for Camera. It's documented, it has tests. And I want to show you that. I want to show you a little bit more of that. So I'm going to turn my screen sharing off so I can show you a couple of things. That stops sharing it. So you should see me now again, I hope. And I want to show you some of the things I've done. So this is part of the camera. This is it goes this way up. This is the lens and the exposure control system. So, for example, you have mechanisms like the when you wind the camera on, it moves that lever which cocks the shutter, and then the shutter can be released when you press the button, which does that. And if you change the shutter speed to make it slower, and you'll hear this, it's a longer time that the shutter stays open. And there are all kinds of mechanisms in here. So, for example, you can put this into an automatic mode, and it will meter the light, and that will determine how wide the iris opens to let in the light. So, although this is a mostly mechanical camera, it does have a little battery. It behaves in the same way that pretty much every other camera in the world does. It has a light-tight box. It has a shutter which stays closed most of the time, but then opens for a specified period of time to let in some light. It has an iris which contracts or opens to also to control how much light comes in. And that's fundamentally all a camera does. This one uses film. Others, digital cameras, use sensors. So, of course, there are other parts. This is the main body of the camera with the, you can see here, the camera winding mechanism. That's, you can see how all those levers interact with each other. And there's a lot of logic in these levers and systems because when there's not enough light, for example, then the camera shouldn't allow you to press the button if it's in the automatic mode. And if you've already wound the camera on once, then it shouldn't allow you to wind it on a second time until you've taken a photograph. And if you press the button, but you haven't wound it on, then it shouldn't open the shutter. Otherwise, you'd get a double exposure. So I wanted to model as much of this as I could in Python. So I'm going to show that to you now, some Python code. Let me quickly share my screen again. Hang on. Oh yes, let's share this screen, and let me give you. Okay. Actually, probably better if I share just that. No, I'll share the whole thing. So let's make this a bit bigger. Let me make the text a bit bigger. And can you see that clearly enough? Is that large enough for you to read? I tell you what, I'll move Microsoft Teams over here so I can see people if they need to tell me anything. All right, so I've got this little, it's a single file of Python, and what I'm going to do, let's go into the right directory. Let me just check where I am. Yes, good. So let's open Python, and I'm in the interpreter. I'm going to, from camera, import camera. So I've got a camera object, and I am going to create an instance of the camera. Okay. So let's find out what sort of state the camera's in. Well, we can see that it has a film with a certain film speed. I've set a film speed on the camera itself. I haven't taken any photographs. I can see that the lens cap is not on. I can see, for example, that the light meter is picking up a certain value, and so on. So let's do, what's the first thing that you do when you've got a camera and you want to take a photograph? A film camera for you young people. Does anybody know?
We're too young to know.
Maybe pointed at something you want to take a picture of and then focus it?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to wind on the film. So the camera's got a film advance lever, and we have to wind that lever on. So there's an object and we're performing an action on it. And that does two things. First of all, it advances the film to the next frame, and it cocks the shutter. So now the shutter is cocked, ready to go off. And I've modeled it very closely. So on this particular camera, the action of cocking the shutter also applies the aperture value to the iris. That's just the way the mechanism happens to work. And now if I press the shutter button, it will actually take a picture. So it takes a light meter reading, it applies the right aperture setting, f16, to the iris, and it opens for 101/28 of a second, and then it closes again. It's taken a photograph. If I press the button again, well, it applies the light meter reading to the exposure control system, but it doesn't actually take a photograph because I haven't wound it on again. So let's wind it on again. What would happen if I try and wind it on twice? Well, you can't do that, so you get an error. Naturally, because you can't do that. So let's try something else. Let's set the camera's aware of its environment, and the environment has a certain amount of light in it, which we can call, it's called scene luminosity. That's just the technical luminosity. That's just the technical term for how much light there is. So at the moment, that's 4,096 what is it, lumens per square meter. That's a sunny day. So let's make it quite let's make it darker. Okay, let's take that down to, say, much less, 256. And now let's see what happens if we try to take a photograph. Well, we've taken a photograph, but this time when it took the photograph, the light meter took a reading, and it had to open the aperture nearly as wide as it could go to count to take a photograph in such low light. So f4 is a very large aperture. And if we reduce the light even further, let's say down to let's take it down to 100, even less. Let's wind it on. Let's try and take a button. It's opened even further. Let's take it down to 32 and wind it on and try and take a photograph. It's blocked. And it's blocked because the oh, by the way, can you see my camera if I show you this, or not right now? Oh, you probably can't. Okay.
We can see your camera at the same time. Or
you can see the camera at the same time. So there's a very clever mechanism here. There's a little needle that moves with the light meter. And what happens is when you try to pull down the lever that releases the shutter, it actually interacts with the tiny little needle there. And if the needle's in the wrong place, then it will block the motion of other levers, and that will block the shutter release. So I can see the same thing if I increase the light to too much. If I increase it to, say, let's try it 9,000 and try and take a photograph. It's blocked, but this time it's blocked because it would be overexposed. If you do things like put the lens cap on, then also it will know that there's not enough light and it won't let you take a photograph. And what do you think would happen if I open the back of the camera right now? It ruins the film, because of course if you open the back of the camera and expose the film to the light, you've spoilt it. So that's what I've been having quite a lot of fun playing with. I'll quickly show you some, too many things here. Let me show you some of the code. So let's make this a little bit bigger. So we start with a camera object, and a camera's got various subsystems. So, for example, a camera has a film advanced mechanism. It's got a way to rewind the film. It's got things like a lens cap. You can have a film in the camera or not. The camera's in an environment, and the camera's got settings and indicators. So it's got a frame counter, which counts how many pictures you've taken on the film. The film has a speed. The shutter has a speed. The aperture has the iris has an aperture, and so on. And you can set these things. You can change them yourself. And some of them it allows you to do. So, for example, you're not allowed to set a speed on the camera that isn't an actual speed that the actual camera has. It's not possible. And the most complex part of this is the exposure control system, because the exposure control system has to put together how much light there is in the world around it, the battery in the camera. If there's no battery in the camera, then the exposure control system can't work. There's the iris, and there's the shutter, which opens for a length of time. And there are all these different levers. So I've modeled it down to the actual interaction of physical levers in the camera. So if a certain lever is in a certain place, then it stops another lever from moving, and that can block the action of the camera. It's all in one Python file. It's meant to be as simple as possible. It doesn't use anything except pure Python. It's got a lot of tests, so I've tried to be a good developer and do plenty of tests, and it's got some nice documentation which you can explore. Let's go to what is it? C is for camera, so you can have a look at it and find out a little bit about how some of the internals work there as well. If you want to run the tests, it just needs PyTest, so you write PyTest and it will run all the tests, 70 tests, and they all pass so far. That's it. Have a look at it if you're interested in that. And I think it's on GitHub, of course, so you can make a copy of it yourself and play with it. I found it really interesting to do this, to how do I turn my sharing off? I'm trying to turn off my sharing. Sorry, how do I turn off screen sharing?
We see your face now.
You see my face? I've turned it off. Good. Okay. So it's a huge amount of fun, but it's really interesting to do this, to model. We talk about object-oriented programming, and this is about real physical objects, and it's a really interesting exercise, and I think it can be very educational. So think about, for example, being in a room and turning on the light. Now, supposing you wanted to represent that in Python, you would have various kinds of things. You would have a room, you would have a light switch, you'd have a light bulb, you'd need electricity, and you also have a certain amount of light in the room. And all of us, now you've got quite a lot of objects, and you can start thinking about how to represent that kind of thing in Python. What would it mean to have a method on the switch that means the switch is on or off? And what happens to the light if the bulb is in a broken state? Or what if there's no electricity at that time? So you can start to model real world things in really interesting ways. And I think that we do a lot of teaching of object-oriented programming, but we don't usually tend to base it around the interaction of real world objects like that. So that's something that I've learned from this experience, and I'm going to try and do a little bit more of when I'm teaching things. So that was it. That was all. I didn't want to take too much of your time, but thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it interesting.
Thank you very much, Daniela. That was very short and sweet and perfect. By the way, Benjamin sent an email to us apologizing for not being able to make it today, and he says he hopes next time we can still call him. He just had a really serious emergency, and that's why he can't make it. But you've chipped in pretty well, Daniela. It's highly appreciated. Your chatty personality works all the time. Does anyone have any questions for Daniela? No questions.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Marta, please go first.
Let's go for it. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting. I really enjoyed the talk about the photography. I take a few pictures myself, but I use a digital camera. I was quite curious to find out, Danielle, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Before you even start writing a program like that, like the class that you wrote for your camera class, like, what was the design process that you went through? I mean, being an enthusiast is one of those things where you probably have a lot of domain knowledge, but what kind of design process did you go through before you actually started writing the code for your
That's a really good question, and the answer is absolutely none, nothing at all. I just opened the in fact, I started doing it in a Jupyter Notebook, interestingly, connecting this back to Carol's talk. And because a Jupyter Notebook is a very good way of playing with things. You can do things in different orders. You know, if I'm typing things in a Python shell, and it's difficult to go back and repeat a sequence. In a Jupyter Notebook, I can pull things out and reorder them. So I literally created a class called camera and then thought, what does a camera have? And then, of course, I didn't, you know, it's completely for fun. So I was at liberty to do it however I liked. And so there really hasn't been a design process. I've probably spent more time taking the camera apart to try to understand how all the different levers interact with each other than actually writing code, because that's been really tricky to reverse engineer the mechanism of the camera and understand what kind of logic is embedded in it.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Maybe may I just ask a question? Like some of these cameras that digital cameras that we have these days have something called firmware. Do you have that in film cameras? Like a processing unit?
There, I mean, I would say pretty much no firmware, or possibly in the very last generation of film cameras, there might be some very rudimentary firmware, but it wouldn't be something that you can update like in a modern camera. So typically all of the logic is completely physical logic. You know, you've got these interactions of levers, and you'll have something that happens that a lever will be in a certain position, and if it's here, then this lever can't move further down to stop it. But if maybe there's some other condition, for example, supposing that this lever is determined by the shutter speed, maybe if this lever is over here, then this thing can move up and down. It's much more complicated than that. I don't know. You can't really see it here. It's just not the right kind of camera for you to see this on my webcam. But there are about 5 or 6 levers, and their interaction actually goes around in a circle. So lever A affects lever B, which moves lever C and then D. And then the first one has an effect on, the last one has an effect on what the first one can do. So the one that's pushing everything down, that's starting all this sequence, suddenly gets blocked in its movement by one of the last ones. It's amazingly complex, very cunning. I don't know how somebody could build such a clever thing. It's lovely to see it. If you like logic and programming, then there's a lot of pleasure, I think, in seeing how something like that works.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I guess we'll have to end off from here as we're a bit pressed for time. We don't want to bore you guys or overly extend the meeting. Just a small reminder for you guys to submit your speeches, your talks for the next meeting, gathering, and don't forget to join PyNam Society. And if you need anything and you want to know anything, feel free to contact Jessica or Noshari, and we will have this again. And have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. See you again, I hope, sometime soon.